Hi there, I'm Whelan, double E, and apologies for the delay in getting this review out. But it's here now, and we'll have another video on Wise Owl coming very soon. Looking forward to that. Right, so let's cut the beef, bro, and discuss A Random Act of Kindness, which is our penultimate episode for Inside Number 9, Series 7. So this is an episode that leans quite heavily into the drama centred around Zach, played by Noah Valentine, and his mother Helen, played by Jessica Hynes. She's a single mother, desperate to bond with her only child before he goes off to university, and he's, well, a fairly typical teenager who resents being pestered by his mother. And that's not me putting down the character at all, as I'm sure we've all gone through that phase at some point in our lives, where we're just angry at the world and automatically resist any kind of interference from our parents. This is especially true with Zach, as his mother is clearly lonely and desperate for companionship, and Zach doesn't want the pressure of being his sad old mum's only pal. This feels like a very honest representation of that parent and teenager family dynamic, and you can't help but feel what both characters are experiencing at any given time. We get frustrated from the outside, knowing that the harder Helen tries with Zach, the more she's going to repel him. And while we're sympathetic towards her loneliness, we can see how her son is viewing her as annoying, needy, and pathetic. Not that she's any of these things, it's just the way that a teenager might typically view a parent. They can do no right. Likewise, we feel the love that Helen has for her son, but we can also see that he's basically being a little shit. And yet, neither of them are bad people. It's just a brutally real depiction of an all too common, no-win domestic situation, played by two brilliant actors. I, for one, was really excited to see Jessica Hynes again after Spaced, and watching her typing away in the kitchen reminded me a bit of Daisy Steiner. Ah, memories. If you watch that show, then you might also remember Reece Shearsmith's role in it, and his immortal line delivery of, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that!" which still pops into my head every time someone makes a very stupid or obvious suggestion. Speaking of them, where are Reece and Steve in all of this? Well, this week Steve plays a friendly stranger named Bob Bliss, double S, who befriends the family after rescuing an injured sparrow from the garden. This seems to work out well for both of them, as Helen is eager for company and Zach needs help with physics, a subject Bob just happens to be an expert in. Reece appears first in the form of a voiceover and later in some video extracts as he explains some of the principles of physics. Now, I didn't take physics at school, I picked chemistry, so I can't tell exactly how these moments resonated with people who knew a bit about the subject. Maybe it's the physics student's revenge for any time we chemistry kids look smug while watching Breaking Bad. However, the use of metaphor within the physics talk really comes through whether you know the subject or not, and it does feel very relevant to the drama on screen. Nothing about it feels dumbed down, and the analogies didn't feel forced to me in any way. But maybe I'm wrong. Former physics students, feel free to @me in the comments. Now, obviously there's a lot more going on with this story, but I can't say much more about it without diving into the spoilers. So before I do that, I'd like to once again praise both of our lead actors this week, and say that some scenes really got to me emotionally. There's a lot of universal themes going on about family and growing up, and it really begs the question of what you would do differently if you could go back to your teenage years, and that's all I'm going to say for now. So if you haven't seen A Random Act of Kindness, please do, and remember to like, subscribe, and come back next week to hear my thoughts on Wise Owl. And I think I'm going to have a lot of thoughts on Wise Owl. So then, on to spoilers. The funny thing about watching this episode was remembering a thing I got asked in my recent Q&A, and that was if I thought Inside Number 9 should do a sci-fi themed episode similar to Black Mirror. I can't remember what I said, but well, here we are. In fact, thinking about it, the scenes where Reece does the science lectures feels very Black Mirror-y to me in a way I can't quite put my finger on. We've also got that emotional gut punch of a closing shot with the poor little dying sparrow, and we also think of Helen, Zach, and their relationship, which has quietly died in the background and neither of them even know. I don't know about you, but that feels like a Black Mirror ending to me. Now, here's the weirdest thing about it, and I don't know if anyone will even believe me. The twist in the episode with Bob being an older version of Zach did actually occur to me the first time I was watching it. This was less to do with the clues, of which there are many on the second watch, and more to do with the performances. I think this is because I've actually tried to write stories where characters encounter their future selves or get messages from their future selves, and the kind of emotions and questions that this would bring up. And of course, the reason those stories have been on my mind in recent weeks is because of 9 Lives Cat, because I got to relive all the guilt of consigning those drafts to the bottom drawer because they just weren't working. So that's weird, right? But watching it again, the clues are subtle, but there are plenty of them, with lines like, "The harder you're pushed, the further you can travel," spoke by a character who's literally pushed himself to travel time, and "It's not gambling if you know who's going to win." That last part made me think that Bob might be crossing a line, as it reminded me of Biff Tannen and the Sports Almanac from Back to the Future. And speaking of Back to the Future, we even had an uncomfortable moment between Helen and her future son, which may or may not have tipped off a few people as to what was going on. One moment where I felt the story might have changed direction was the phone call from Reese, where he says, "You mustn't leave your son alone with him." Now, that got me thinking of all the warnings that often come with time travel stories and the dangers of interacting with your past or future self. This often makes me think of the doppelganger myth, and I wonder if the two of those might be related. Anyway, this could have branched into a timeline collapse scenario, which might have been interesting, or something terrible happens to one or both of the Zacks because they shouldn't be in close proximity or interacting with each other at all. And I thought maybe one would get unhinged and kill the other to assume their identity, although that's not quite how it worked out. Was a suicide really necessary? Perhaps not, but it most likely served the purpose of trauma bonding Zack and Helen, ensuring they wouldn't fall out of each other's lives like they did the first time. And I suppose future Zack had to be written out of the plot one way or another. Another avenue I thought they might have explored, and according to the podcast this was considered, I might have liked the version where Bob is delusional and only thinks he's a time traveller who's found his past self. Or maybe it's a deliberate ruse for some other purpose. I remember bracing myself for a dark twist and even thinking, Bob, please don't turn out to be a pedalo. The seemingly random appearance of Bob to fix a damaged family also reminded me of an old South Park episode where some of the kids are visited by their future selves. Only the future versions turned out to be actors hired by their parents as part of a scam to scare them onto the straight and narrow. Those ideas might have been fun, but I do like that they kept Bob as Zack so that the emotional core of the story remains authentic. Otherwise it might have been too much of a jump and might have even cheapened those earlier scenes. Now, this story could have just been a very sweet tale about how Zack went back in time to save his mother and make amends, but then we have the alternative perspective offered by Bran, and the idea of being collateral damage. Now, maybe his motives aren't the most compelling and his life wasn't completely ruined by the timeline shift. I mean, I'm biased, but personally I don't think that making videos is the worst fate in the world. But he does bring up an interesting point. This touches on the butterfly effect, which could either refer to chaos theory or that relentlessly bleak time travel movie from the early 2000s. Take your pick. It's the idea of a seemingly innocuous thing, say the flapping of the wings of a butterfly or perhaps even a sparrow, that causes unpredictable changes in the universe. Here, Zack uses time travel to save his mother, but doesn't consider that changing his course will also affect the lives of others, and maybe not for the better. Bran only ever finds out as he's able to somehow contact himself from the original timeline before it collapses. In forcing Zack to reset the course of his future, Bran is protecting his own interests, but is also acting on principle. Because what gives Zack the right to change the timeline purely for the benefit of his own family? Of course, we understand why Zack did this, but he either didn't think or didn't care about the consequences for anyone else. And I'm not just talking about Bran. How many other lives have been directly or indirectly affected by the presence of someone who ought to have died in the 2020s? Was Helen aware on some level that she shouldn't still be there? What did Zack and Bran's research mean for the future of humanity, and what's potentially been lost there? Zack can't really answer these questions, and yet other people may live or die by the results. To change time in this scenario is to place yourself as the lead character in everyone else's story, and risk collateral damage for everybody else. And it could be argued that no one has the right to do this. Likewise, Bran's course correction is kinda doing that as well. Just because things are going back to the original timeline doesn't automatically mean that this is correct, or that this is the best choice for everyone. So yeah, some food for thought there. This is, again, a number 9 that may have really benefited from a feature-length runtime, because there are so many ideas to explore, and we had so little time. Oh, the irony. And yes, I know, if you dig into any time travel story deep enough, you're going to find some kind of plot hole, because time travel isn't real, and we write these sci-fi stories as best we can. Is this a good story? I would say yes, as the time travel element is a device that services the characters, their motivations and the plot, not the other way around. I'm not saying it's flawless. I did find the jump to the future and the conflict between Zack and Bran quite rushed on the first viewing, if I'm honest. And I'm sure if I were to nitpick, I'd probably find some detail that doesn't quite hold up. But for me, as long as there's a good story, compelling characters and interesting ideas to explore, I can tolerate a good dose of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. So that was a random act of kindness. Originally a simple act of kindness in early development, but I like the change as it highlights the fact that many of the events are actually not random at all. See, they were lying to us through titles. Sneaky. And speaking of sneaky, if the hair is where I think it is, look closely at Zack's laptop before the bird hits the window, then that is very clever indeed. Crafty little hair. Anyway, over to you. What did you think? Did you enjoy it, and how do you feel about Inside Number 9 doing a time travel story? How do you think it holds up to other time travel fiction? I'm dying to hear your thoughts, so please leave them in the comments. And of course, remember to like, subscribe and ring the bell if you want to be the first to hear me babbling on about Wise Owl and my weird obsession with old British public information films. Anyway, that's it from me. Goodbye.